night was cold and silent, and Ethan could barely breathe under the weight in his chest. Sitting on a bench in a deserted park, he held between his fingers a small amulet his mother had given him years ago. Her memory was still vivid. The gentle sound of her voice, the warmth of her embraces, the tenderness in her gaze. But now, everything felt distant, as if time had ripped away the only anchor that had kept him steady. Since her passing, life had become a blur of empty days and sleepless nights. He had tried to distract himself, to fill the void with work and shallow conversations, but nothing seemed to ease the crushing pain of her absence. How do you move forward when everything you love is gone? How do you find meaning when loss consumes every thought? With a heavy sigh, Ethan lifted his gaze to the dark sky, searching for answers among the stars. And then something inside him cracked, an urgent need to understand his pain, to find something beyond suffering. He didn't want to just survive. He wanted to truly live. Driven by an unfamiliar impulse, he decided to set out in search of answers. Maybe there was another way to face loss. Maybe pain didn't have to be the end, but the beginning of something new. What he didn't know was that his journey would lead him to a wisdom that would forever change his perspective on life. Ethan left without a clear destination, carrying only a backpack and the weight of longing in his heart. His path led him to a small village in the mountains, where he met Thomas, a monk with a serene gaze and calm demeanor. There was something about the man's presence that radiated a profound peace, something Ethan had never felt before. Intrigued, he decided to stay for a few days at the temple where Thomas lived, hoping to find some kind of answer. But as the days passed, instead of wise words or ready-made solutions, all he was given were simple tasks. Sweeping the courtyard, carrying water, watching the wind sway the leaves. At first, this frustrated him. How could these small actions help him overcome his pain? He wanted to understand, to have an explanation that made sense. But Thomas simply smiled and said, "Observe, listen, be present." In the silence of the mountains, Ethan began facing his own thoughts like never before. Anger and sadness came in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes overwhelming. He found himself questioning why life could be so cruel, why the people we love are taken from us without warning. On a stormy night, his restlessness reached its peak. He found Thomas sitting motionless in the rain, as if he didn't mind the cold or the thunder. "Why don't you take shelter?" Ethan asked, irritation creeping into his voice. Thomas looked at him and replied calmly, "The rain falls because it must fall. If I run from it, it will still exist. If I accept it, it simply is." Those words echoed within Ethan. Was he fighting against something inevitable? Instead of resisting pain, did he need to learn to accept it? The next day, while walking alone, Ethan came across an old carpenter named James, who was patiently carving a piece of wood. Curious, he asked what he was making. James smiled and replied, "I don't create anything. I simply remove what keeps the true form from appearing." Ethan watched each careful stroke of the chisel, and in that moment, something clicked inside him. Was his pain like that block of wood? Instead of trying to ignore it or fight against it, should he allow it to shape him? He remembered a story his mother used to tell about the phoenix, the bird that rises from its own ashes. Maybe his loss wasn't the end, but an invitation to become someone new. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan began to notice subtle changes. He still missed his mother, and there were still moments of sadness, but he no longer tried to run from those feelings. He accepted that pain was part of the journey, and that every moment, no matter how difficult, had something valuable to offer. Thomas taught him that suffering is not a punishment, but a teacher. James helped him understand that just as wood must be worked on to reveal its true form, we too must allow life to shape us. And little by little, Ethan began to find peace, not because his pain had disappeared, but because he had learned to walk with it instead of against it. On a quiet morning, Ethan climbed to the highest point of the mountain, where the sky seemed to merge with the earth. There, he sat on a rock and watched as the rising sun bathed everything in golden hues. For the first time in a long while, he felt no urgency to seek answers, no need to fill the emptiness with questions. He simply breathed. Closing his eyes, he let his memories come instead of resisting them. He saw his mother's smile, heard her soft laughter, felt the warmth of her embrace, and then he understood something he had never fully accepted before. Pain was not a sign of weakness, but of love. We only miss what was profoundly meaningful. Absence was not an emptiness to be fought, but a sacred space where memories could live, where love never faded. Ethan opened his eyes and realized that the wind touched his skin the same way it always had. But something inside him was different now. He no longer needed to run from what he felt. Suffering was not an enemy, and happiness wasn't about erasing pain, but about integrating it. He remembered Thomas's words about the rain. It falls because it must, but after the rain, the earth blooms. He realized that just as the chisel shapes the wood, suffering has the power to transform us, revealing our essence. His mother was no longer physically there, but the love she had given him had never left. He didn't need to forget in order to move forward. He needed to honor that connection by fully embracing life, allowing himself to feel everything, the pain, the joy, the longing, without fear. Back at the temple, Ethan found Thomas and, without needing many words, smiled. The monk simply nodded, as if he had always known this moment would come. That night, as the wind gently swayed the trees, Ethan wrote in his journal, "Pain did not destroy me. It shaped me, and within it, I found a love that never dies." He had walked a path of loss and searching, but now he understood that it was never about finding something external. The peace he had been seeking had always been there, waiting for him to see it. With this newfound understanding, Ethan was ready to move forward, not by leaving pain behind, but by carrying it differently, transformed into gratitude and wisdom. Ethan's story reminds us that pain is part of the journey, but it doesn't have to be an unbearable burden. So often, we try to escape suffering, searching for immediate answers or distractions that only delay the inevitable. But just as wood must be carved to reveal its true form, pain can also transform us, shaping us into something deeper. When we stop resisting and learn to embrace what we feel, we realize that loss doesn't erase love. It teaches us to live it in a different way. Suffering doesn't define us, but the way we choose to walk with it can reveal our true essence. In the end, the peace we seek isn't found in the absence of pain, but in our ability to accept it and turn it into wisdom. And just as Ethan found his own path, each of us has the opportunity to look within and realize that strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning from it. May we remember that every farewell also carries a new beginning, that every tear can water the seed of a new understanding. Perhaps the question isn't, how do I overcome pain, but rather, how can I allow it to make me more human, more present, more alive? May this reflection stay with you. And if this message resonated with you, I invite you to continue this journey with me. In our next reflection, we'll explore another essential aspect of life, one that has the power to transform the way we face each challenge. See you there.